discord.gg/KG Lounge. The proposition is idealism's true. I'm going to be taking the affirmative, or no, Spork's going to be taking the affirmative view. Capp.KG over here, right here, is going to be taking the negation view. And the relevant judge and potentially moderator for this debate is going to be Augs.KG. And yeah, I guess we can get it started. So, first, can you explicate the idealist thesis?
The idealist thesis. I'm just gonna follow that the mental, or in a sense, non-physical or abstractions are the fundamental substance of the world.
Fundamental substance. Okay, and by fundamental substance, what is being said there?
Basically, the reality hinges upon them, and everything else exists in virtue of or as derivations of it.
Okay. And everything hinges on or as derivations of it. Okay, and okay, I'll just send that. Okay, and okay, now what's your argument for idealism?
My argument for idealism.
Yep.
It's given that for any sort of intelligibility within reality, there will have to be some sort of category of it. So, for example, like when you get particulars and universals, if you go ahead and you deny universals, you're still implicitly committing to some trivial category of particularness in the same sense for the condition
Oh,
question.
okay. Well, I don't. What I'm unclear on is why intelligibility would have to be this groundbreaking notion, which commits you to these type of. Are you
I'm
saying intelligibility commits you to particulars and universals?
Oh, I'm just basically saying that the world appears uniform, uniform, unified, and ordered. And in
Hmm.
that sense, it just appears to have fundamental abstraction.
Okay, but that you understand that that's compatible with like literally any view. Even nominalism can accept that it appears to be the case that the world is like uniform, right? But
I dis
this doesn't seem like it does anything to your view, right? Because
I disagree because that's
obviously,
I do. What do you think? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can go ahead.
yeah, obviously the world just appearing uniform, right? That doesn't seem like it does anything for your view.
All right. What do you think? Could you define nominalism? I mean, just so I can know exactly how you view
It's
it.
just it's just the denial of particulars and universals. You can take some type of archetype theory for categorical distinctions where when we see something like red, it's basically just an archetype. Like we gain knowledge of redness through our experience of the world, like some type of qualia. And then when that qualia is repeated, then we categorize that as red. Right. This is just nominalism. It doesn't commit you to any type of metaphysical baggage, such as like particulars and universals or instantiations of redness. It doesn't commit you to any of that.
Isn't nominalism, or basically like a stance based on the problem of universals?
No, it's just the denial of universals.
Yeah,
It's a view that says that universals and particulars don't exist.
yeah, and in that sense, I view it more so to then mean that there's going to be, like, in a sense, multiple realizability, and in a way, you're implicitly committing to a sense of particularness, or like
No, things don't have to be multiply realizable, because again, these type of things like redness under the nominalist view are just going to be these type of archetypes, right? And those are going to be that for which our minds dependent, right?
uh,
It's just based on our prior experience of the world. It doesn't commit you to saying that these things exist at all. But I'm just unclear on how, like, even accepting universals in particulars, how does that motivate idealism?
what's an archetype for you?
Yeah, an archetype's just going to be this type of categorical distinction. It's a conceptual tool. I might not be using the right word. I think it's either archetype, prototype, it's something like that. But that's just what I explicated the concept. I think it's just like when you see red, um, and there's this image of qualia that then when you see another thing, that quality is repeated, and then you categorize that as red.
Okay,
So
right.
anything that would generate that qualia there, or whenever you see that qualia, just categorized it as red as a mental category. But yeah, just accepting. Let's say we accept like the whole universal then idealism talk, right? Um,
Hmm?
how does that do anything for idealism? Because clearly there are other views that can account for that, right? Such as like Platonism, um, other views as well. Like even theism, where there is a physical world and the mental isn't, but the mental can account for those. So how does this motivate like idealism?
Okay, right. I mean, in a sense that there wouldn't be some sort of fundamentally categorical, like, like in a way. So there's like, no fundamental universal. In that way, I feel like there would be no ultimate specific sameness. And because of that, then what is exactly the thing that unifies them all?
Yeah, you can say that the unification, because Deleuze speaks of this, you can say that the unification is just differentiation, right?
Yeah,
And that's going to be pre-ontological. It's
because
this
you,
kind of thing. It's like this wave or like movement underlying to existence, right? It doesn't exist because it's in the virtual. Um, but this, I'm actually not like using Deleuze jargon. Like this is just a different
oh yeah,
contrastive universe.
I was just wondering if you could like explain it to me because I don't know anything about the lose.
Okay, so you know how Platonism has like these abstract, they spatial atemporal entities, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you can imagine those. Imagine something like that, but it's not ontically committed. So it's something like that limits on, because things aren't just themselves. Because like a cat is not a cat because it exists, right? Something's not red because it exists, right? So you need, and this is just what Deleuze says, right? I'm just bringing this up as a contrastive view. I'm not actually committing myself to this, but he says that you need something which is underlying on or limiting on existence, and you can imagine that as differentiation. But if it's a limiting on existence, then obviously it's not going to be that for which exists, right? It's pre-ontological, so it's outside of the space of what exists, insofar as it's in the virtual, and the virtual is just this type of plane of immanence, um, and then from there you get uh, this thing that grounds these type of fundamental universals, or in particular. It's very similar to Platonism, but I also think Platonism can account for universals and particulars as well. So again, I'm just not seeing how this is motivating idealism, given that you can be like a Deleuzian or a Platonist and you solve the problem while not committing yourself to idealism.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. Like, yeah, I'm totally lost with the Deleuze thing. So I don't know, maybe like you could type it out or like,
Okay, we can just talk about like Platonism then.
yeah.
Um, you can say that universals and particulars are grounded in the world of forms, and they're just instantiations of the perfect form. This
But
is Neoplatonism. It's not like normal Platonism. But under that view, obviously they're accounted for, right? There's something that concretely exists that grounds them, grounds the universe in particulars.
I could have sworn though that when it comes to Platonism, the forms themselves are the universals, given they're the world of perfection.
No, no, the forms wouldn't be the universals, not in the normal sense. The perfections would be the universals, and then what grounds those is the world of forms. So, like, you can imagine like a perfect form of a chair, that's the universal, and then what grounds that is the world of forms, which is where it exists.
Yeah, but isn't the world of form specifically the world of okay, maybe I'm tripping. Yeah, I'd probably tripping. Um, okay. But isn't Platonism in its own way idealist there?
No, not Neoplatonism. If you're
Uh,
like a normal Platonist, you can kind of like say that the one is this type of mental thing, and then maybe. But if you're a Neoplatonist, no, because it exists independently of minds under Neoplatonism.
mm.
But yeah, I'm
And
not really just seeing how like you're
like
motivating
I wasn't
idealism.
talking about any like particularization of consciousness, as in specifically me or you, when I'm talking about idealism, because I was talking more about objective idealism in the sense of like an absolute for reality.
Yeah, that doesn't matter as long as um the thing under Platonism, which grounds the world of forms, isn't mental. Then it's not idealism because it's not fundamental. Like the mental wouldn't be fundamental; it would be the world of forms, which grounds the universe in particulars, and that exists mind independently under Neoplatonism.
I see, and as like in a way, being self-reflexive and or rational, would that not be itself mindless or mental?
No, because it doesn't have any rationality. It doesn't have mental states. It exists mind independently.
Why wouldn't it have mental states in its own unification outside of the particularizations?
That's just stipulated under the view.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was talking about with the absolute.
Yeah, I mean you can like obviously there are forms of Platonism where the thing that accounts for universals is something mental, like the one or the monad or some other shit. But Obviously, it's not the case that and this like Neoplatonism doesn't commit you to saying that the world of forms has a mental property. No,
I need to read more about Neoplatonism. I've read like very little.
but I bring these up just to say that if your argument for idealism is just that idealism accounts for these things, and, I mean, I can grant that, but it doesn't seem like unless you want to say that it's the best explanation, in which case you would have to, I can just like run a stalking horse with Platonism and ask why would be a better explanation.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, that's why when you asked me specifically about how I was viewing idealism, I was talking about the reality being grounded in the fundamental abstract and mind likeness of reality. It was
Okay,
the two
and is that
things.
noumena?
Noumena?
Is that the name? Yeah.
Like I don't know. I don't really like what's it called, agree with things like the noumenal world in the sense that I was taking more of an approach with Hegel and trying to take it down, like you know the barrier between them.
Yeah.
Given and there was the particularizations with rationality and like the sameness with the structure of the world and the connection.
But yeah, I mean, your argument it didn't really seem motivating for idealism, given that there are obviously other accounts which would explain the same datum, even if we accept it as datum. Um, in which case, I don't see why idealism would be a privileged test to those. But even then, you don't even have to accept the datum. You can be a nominalist. You can say that it's just grounded, or you can say that the datum, like universals and particulars, don't exist. You can take the archetype theory. Um, I think the archetype theory is way better, anyways. It's more parsimonious than
What
committing
is
yourself to all of these
what is
fundamental entities.
what does that specifically fall under?
Nominalism is its own category. It just has uh, it's just a view that no universals and particulars exist. Um, and then within nominalism, there's different ways you can try to explain categorical distinctions.
Can you nigga or conclude? It's been 10 minutes.
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, do you want to conclude?
yeah. I'm totally fine with like conceding here.
All right, so I have some notes here.
Nigga, he conceded, nigga.
Like
No,
what?
you wanted to conclude. Let's be. I want Ox to give
Okay,
a.
I mean, yeah, so the idealist thesis that he presented was just that the mental is the fundamental substance of the world. Capp said, what does it mean to be a fundamental substance? Spork said, reality hinges upon it and everything else is a derivation of it. Then Capp just asked for the argument. He said intelligibility. In order for intelligibility, there needs to be a category. If you reject universals, you implicitly agree to a category of particulars. And then he said the world seems unified and ordered. Capp said that's compatible with a nominalist view. They can agree that the world seems to be uniform with a different explanation. Obviously, the world appearing uniform doesn't do anything for your view, is what Capp said after that. Then Spork asked him to define nominalism. He said the denial of universals. When we see something like red, we gain the experience of the world. When it's repeated, we get a property. It's just the denial of universals, Capp reiterated. Spork said there's multiple realizability. Capp said they don't have to be. These are just archetypes and they're mind dependent. Okay, so this little portion, I think Spork was just having a little bit of trouble understanding Capp's version of nominalism. So then Capp just threw him Neoplatonism as a different explanation. Basically, they got into would the world of forms depend on a mental property? Capp explained under Neoplatonism you wouldn't have to. So when I account for all the objections and were the objections met with force or were they really responded to, I have to say no. So I have to say Capp won the debate.